Your home with BuildAid on Mix 93.8. Proudly brought to you by AfriSam. AfriSam, creating concrete possibilities. Mix 93.8.
BuildAid on Mix 93.8, brought to you by AfriSam. Sumaya Valley, my next guest. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're an architect and director at the practice Counterspace. You've given me some notes that I find fascinating. That women bring focus, myth, narrative, quirky sensibilities, attention to tactile and sensory qualities. I like that. Just explain it to me as a boy.
Okay. My point about that was really largely related to the fact that our professions become over-rationalized and over-sterile. And like the other guest mentioned as well, it is largely male-dominated. And because our practice is born in Johannesburg and really tries to grapple with and deal with our context intelligently and on a deeper level, we try to bring out the qualities that we find in our context, like myth, narrative, storytelling, and really we really try to find and embed deeper meaning in our projects. It's not just about laying out foundations and column grids and that kind of thing, but architecture can be so much more.
Do you think architecture gets trapped in building regulations and ways of doing things, sort of dinosaur thinking?
Yes, definitely. Our practice is also heavily geared towards experimentation. And the thing with building regulations that a woman from Atelier Bow Wow, a studio internationally who I met last year, said is that we make building regulations and our bodies form those. So we part of our practice is about really trying to understand and challenge those notions of what is acceptable and what gets rolled out, because it does become architecture is a very slow profession. A dinosaur, I think, is the right word. It does become stagnant and go on forever if we don't experiment and change that.
I mentioned before the show started that we looked at two residential structures in a BIM model, and one weighed substantially more than the other, which you normally don't go and weigh a building, but the foundations were the same, which didn't really make sense. So a lot of those traditions and regulations and that I possibly didn't even come out of architecture. Could have been construction or quantity surveying or a combination of the lot. And if what you're saying, and I trust it's true, is that women will bring myth, quirky sensibilities, sensory qualities, etc. Hopefully then we can start thinking out of the box when it comes to how we construct buildings.
Of course, and I think that also we're in an age where building means much more than just planned construction. We're in an age of experimentation. I'm involved in teaching as well, and the drawings that our students bring are far more than AutoCAD or sketches. They're delving into other forms of media, into film, into real experimental kind of modeling systems that have other evocative qualities, and that we finally have tools, I think, that are starting to speak to our place and to relate to the dynamics of the place that we're in. So I think, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, you are definitely.
I think experimentation is hugely important to our profession.
Yeah. We're going to chat about it later in the show with one of your colleagues on making architecture attractive, if you like, particularly to women. But if we focus on these realities, I think it could go a long way in achieving that objective.
For sure. I'm also involved a lot in exhibition work and in museum space, and architecture and building is about creating and designing an atmosphere and an environment. It's not just about a shell, although it is about shelter. It's a lot more than that.
Yeah. Sumaya Valley, thank you for chatting to us.
Thank you.
BuildAid on Mix 93.8. My name is Graham Alexander. In the studio, Simon and Kay Okay, looking after all of us. 6 amazing ladies, amazing professionals in the studio talking about architecture, but more importantly, women in architecture. My next guest is Monica Albonico. Monica, thanks so much for coming to chat to us.
Thank you for having me.
You're originally from Argentina.
That's correct. Yeah.
How long have you been here, Monica?
You don't want to ask those questions.
Okay, a long time. Monica, if I could call it a speciality, if you don't mind, is in regeneration. And what comes to mind, and it's only because I know the area relatively well, is the Braamfontein area. And I know it's one of your, if I could say, dreams or objectives to get the Wits University campus into a city. And Braamfontein's next door.
That's correct. I mean, I think one of the projects that we've been involved and has been taking a couple of years and obviously goes through different stages is urban regeneration, looking at the integration of the university into the fabric of Braamfontein that doesn't act as a sort of completely disconnected space and bring the energy of the students and academia life into the city. I think that will make it a safer place, a much more inviting place.
Working with the community, society in regenerating an area, and it could be any area, if it's a poor area, maybe an old slum or something, that's important, I guess.
I think for me it's been the focus of my career, and it's incredibly challenging. Engage with people, sustain the engagement, and make sure that the multiple voices get here and get taken into account when we actually allocate funding, when we allocate resources. Because at the end of the day, those communities are there to sustain whatever investment the government or whoever is making into the areas.
When you're working in relatively new areas, and I would guess that Johannesburg is a relatively new city, particularly its the outlying areas, do you find you can change the urban fabric, if you like, rather than carry on with the old? I think what I'm trying to say, if you went into an older city like in Europe, you may have a different challenge.
I think we spoke about transformation, we spoke about innovation. I think we're really very stuck here in terms of how we actually see our city and how we actually create an urban space that really respond to the society that we want to be. And I think on that we have a lot to learn from each other, a lot of experimentation, a lot of trial and errors that actually had to happen before we can actually get it right. We talk about the diversity of communities and cultures. We need to create spaces for those communities to express themselves, and we haven't really found the way to do it yet. But again, I think we're moving towards the right direction.
When it comes to transformation or getting women more included, I suppose there are two sides here. One is the architect and the community. And if you're talking to a community without a woman's voice, you're not getting the whole picture.
You will never get anything done in the first place. But I think it's not only working with women in community that actually are the real drivers and nurturers of development, but also working with colleagues, planners, quantity surveyors, people in the built environment that actually more and more have become part of this more interactive process. And I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of them, young, older, with a lot of experience, and I see that becoming a much more of a feature. Still a lot to be done at that level, make sure that they get the right place, get the right opportunities. But there's a different dynamic that women create, which I think is very important in any teamwork to actually make sure that exists.
When you compare residential to commercial, you're going to bump into two different types of developer. Do you find that the commercial developers may be a bit more brutal than the residential developers?
Look, I think this is very much at the core of urban design. I mean, people think that urban design is about making pretty streets, landscape or scape, but actually urban design is about finding the value of investment and making sure that it's actually also incorporate other aspects, which is about creating better places for people to live in, more livable cities, more sustainable cities. And I think in extracting value out of investment is something that you will see the commercial developer be very protective about. So is the residential one. I mean, especially when you're actually talking about big residential developments, I think it's how you bring a balance between what development can yield, but at the same time, what development can actually offer and leave behind, which is our concern and our focus.
I suppose it's also a bit of a chicken and egg situation. Is it driven by architecture and urban design, or is it driven by a developer? I mean, the developer should be buying into the design and the plan.
That is the key question. I mean, how actually is there a meeting point? And I think, again, I've been in the profession for some years, and I've had wonderful success stories. I've had many others that I couldn't say the same.
Monica, thank you so much
you.
for chatting to us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Your home with BuildAid on Mix brings you all sorts of interesting info about building. Graham Alexander chats to different guests every Wednesday evening between 6 and 7. Proudly brought to you by AfriSam. AfriSam, creating concrete possibilities.